Hey, what's up, universe? It is 1:31 p.m. on Tuesday, August 8th, 2023. The inspiration for this video is going to be, it's going to ride on the video that I did earlier this morning, so to speak, the last video that I just did. And I could cry because some things, it's just interesting. Let me just go ahead and start here. I woke up and I took a couple of hours and I listened to a couple of Molly McCord's podcasts. I re-listened to the 8-8 Lionsgate podcast, and I listened to her Venus Star Point podcast. Now, what caught my attention from those was the dates that she gave for Venus. And she's like, the last time that there was, Venus was behind the sun in Leo, the way that it is now, or going to be, I should say, on August 13th coming up, was back in August 2015. She's like, so think back over the last, 8 years, and look at what was going on for you, what started, just kind of look at this cycle of time, this period of time. And I was thinking, well, I don't remember specifically what was going on for me back in August 2015. I know I was writing my journals. I don't have my journals anymore from that time, so I can't go back and reference specifically. Thankfully, my personal email account has a magnificent amount of data in it because I don't delete anything. And I was sending people just a lot of emails. And so there's information in there. So the other thing is that she was like, this sounds kind of familiar. She's like, as I was preparing to do this podcast, she's like, a lot of this material sounded familiar. And she's like, I realized I did a very similar podcast 4 years ago when I forgot what she called it, but it was in the middle of the cycle with Venus, right? So in 2019, August 2019. Now, I remember August 2019. In August 2019, I received, let me back up a bit. I'd gone to Date with Destiny, a Tony Robbins event, in December 2018. There's a lot I could go into just on that. Let me back up even further. In November or so, I think. I can't remember. I always forget if it's October or November of 2018. I went to Unleash the Power Within. Advanced Biotechnologies, the company that I worked for, and it's interesting how this all ties together, right? So Advanced Biotechnologies sent 6 of us to Unleash the Power Within because the CEO of Advanced Biotechnologies is a big Tony Robbins fan. So I went to that, never had any exposure to Tony Robbins, was like, what the hell is this? It's a 3-day, very intense experience. And while I was there, I signed up. They're super great at upselling, and I was like, I'm gonna follow my nudges. I'm gonna go all in with this, right? And so at UPW, which is Unleash the Power Within, I signed up for Date with Destiny. I bought a package, right? I signed up for Date with Destiny and Life and Wealth Mastery, which is 3 separate events. Life and Wealth Mastery typically are paired together, and most people go to both events, but they are separate. You can do Life Mastery or Wealth Mastery, but most of the time people do Life and Wealth Mastery together. So I bought these 3 events. I went to Date with Destiny in December, and that was in Florida. And then I didn't set up a time to go to Life and Wealth Mastery. Now with Life and Wealth Mastery, you've got 2 options. Well, you've got more than that. You can go to Life and Wealth here in the United States, and there's probably other places across the globe, or another big one is in Fiji, right? And so I came home from Date with Destiny, and I asked both of my children separately. I said, hey, if you had a choice, where would you rather go? Would you rather go to, I think it's Palm Beach, maybe? I forget which city in Florida, and I don't even think I may have that wrong. The completely wrong name in Florida. Sorry. Anyway, would you rather go to this place in Florida, or would you rather go to Fiji? Odin was like, Fiji. Milo was like, Fiji. And like, mind you, that was like 4 years ago, so they were like 13 and 11 or something like that. Maybe even like 12 and 10. So I was just kind of like, cool. So I get set up. Well, actually, I just have that in my mind, right? And back at that time, when I was at Date with Destiny, I signed up to be a Tony Robbins Platinum partner, which I told you was like, it's a lot of money to do that. It's not cheap. And that was all part of my financial exploration here, right? Anyway, what I'm trying to get at by saying that is that put me in a financial position where I just was not sure about anything financially. It was another big decision that put me into debt. And long story short, as the year went on, as 2019 went on, I was just not sure. I just basically had it in my mind that I would never be going to Life and Wealth Mastery. I resigned myself to that fact, and I was like, whatever. Now, this brings me to August 2019. Okay, so it's August 2019, and I had a Chase credit card, right? And it's like towards the middle, around maybe the 20-something of August, I receive an email, and they're like, we've increased your credit limit. Now, in my mind, I was like, who in their right mind who would give me more credit? Because I had an Amex card, a business Amex card at the time. That's what I put the Tony Robbins Platinum thing on. If anybody looked at my debt to income ratio, anybody in their right mind, any sane institution, individual would be like, we're not increasing this guy's limit. Like that's insane. Chase was like, here's another, I think it was like $2,100 or $2,300. It was enough for me, just enough for me to buy the plane ticket to Fiji. And I was like, holy shit. Because I think when I got back and I told the kids, I wasn't sure when I was just talking about it a few minutes ago if I had actually set up, but I'm pretty sure I called them. I did. I called the Tony Robbins people, and I was like, yeah, I'll go to Fiji in like September. Yeah, late September, early October 2019. And they're like, cool. And so throughout 2019, I was just like, I don't know how the hell that's going to happen. So August, Chase is like, here's some extra credit. And I'm like, what? And I checked out the flights, and it was literally like it was just barely enough to buy the plane ticket. So I talked to the CEO, and I'm like, look, I was like, here's where I'm at, man. Like I'd love to go to this. And I'm just telling him, I'm explaining all of these details. And he's like, this is pretty nuts. He's like, tell you what, I'd hate for you know me, I'm a big Tony fan. I'd hate for the only thing for you to keep you from going is the money for the lodging, right? He's like, I'll make you a personal loan. We'll have the company won't be involved. This will just be between you and me. And we'll get you to Fiji. And so that worked out. And that's where I met Ricky, the kid that I went to in Colorado that had the beautiful teaching moment in 2021. So I'm just getting to the point that like, I remember what happened in August 2019. And I was able to pay, the CEO back. So we were totally square with that. And deeply appreciative of that, just in case anybody is watching. Like, that's why I say thank you to everybody that's been a part of my journey. Every single person, regardless of how they've contributed. It does not have to be financially. It's just anyone who's ever been a part of my life. Thank you. Thank you. There's this beautiful magic that unfolds in life, and every single one of you is a part of it. Every single one of you. So nothing but gratitude for that and love. And so to get back to like August 2015 and to get back to right now, right? Because August 2015 was like a new Venus cycle, and August 2023 is the beginning of a new Venus cycle, right? So Molly's like, okay, take a look, see what's happening, see what's coming back up for you that was related to August 2015. And I was like, okay. So I look at my emails, right? First thing that comes up when I put into Google and I say, in my sent box after July 31st, 2015, before September 1st, 2015, and it's this email that I wrote to a coworker while I used to work at Opor, and it is this. Have you guys ever seen the show Jericho? It's 2 seasons. It got canceled like 3, maybe 4 times. And it was the whole premise of the show. And some people might think it's kind of cheesy. But it's actually, it's an interesting show to me. I enjoy it. It is the whole premise of the show is that dirty bombs, right? Small nuclear bombs were detonated on American soil in like I don't know how many different cities, quite a few different cities, right? And how the narrative is basically that Iran was responsible, and then I think somehow China may have been involved as well. Right? Now, this show aired, let me just double check here real quick, right? (2006) to like, I don't know, 2008 maybe, is when this show was on TV. And CBS, I was trying to find the network. And so, like I say, it's 2 seasons long, not that many episodes, but that's kind of the premise, right? Now, this email that I wrote, there's a company called the Rand Corporation. This is real life, and this is now in real life now, not on the TV show. There is a company called the Rand Corporation. And if you look it up, it says that it's a nonprofit global policy think tank. And it is originally formed by Douglas Aircraft Company to offer research and analysis to the United States Armed Forces. It's financed by the U.S. government, private endowment corporations, including healthcare industries, universities, and private individuals. Okay, you can go research that some more, go look it up yourself. At the same time, now I have this little clip on my Instagram and YouTube videos about the Washington Institute, right? The Washington Institute for Near East Policy. And they are a think tank based in Washington, D.C., focused on United States foreign policy in the Middle East. Established in 1985, the Institute's mission statement says that it seeks to, quote, advanced a balanced and realistic understanding of American interests in the Middle East and to promote the policies that secure them. Now, if you go back and you watch that short little clip, it is Patrick Clausen who is speaking, and he has there's other time segments in that bigger clip and the overall like hour some odd, discussion by the Washington Institute where he talks about, how do I want to say, just the potential about developments that could happen. This is about the problem, reaction, solution kind of a thing, about crisis initiation. But there's other segments within that hour-long thing that he makes curious comments. Now, to go back to the Rand Corporation, tie this into Jericho, and this stuff that's coming up for me right now, right? So this is what I sent back in August 2015, and I just started coming back and talking about this stuff again just within the last couple of days. And I'm like, what's this about? So the Rand Corporation, back in 2006, which is the same year that Jericho came out, they published a brief that's called the Center for Terrorism Risk Management Policy, right? And this one is titled, I guess is part of the Rand organization, and from their Center for Terrorism Risk Management Policy, right? This technical report is called Considering the Effects of Catastrophic Terrorist Attack. Now let me read you just a little bit from this PDF that was published in 2006. It says, in 2004, the Rand Corporation performed a study for the Department of Homeland Security to examine response strategies following a catastrophic terrorist attack. For this work, a detailed scenario was constructed describing the effects of terrorist-detonated nuclear explosion in the port of Long Beach, and a series of strategic decision-making games were executed with leaders from the government and emergency response community. In 2004, the Rand Corporation performed a study for the Department of Homeland Security to examine the response strategies following a catastrophic terrorist attack. For this work, a detailed scenario was constructed describing the effects of a terrorist-detonated nuclear explosion in the port of Long Beach. Now, I find that more than just a little curious. Because there is such a thing as political currency and political cover. This is part of the problem, reaction, solution. And this goes into everything that I've been talking about being in control of my beliefs and my mental real estate and what is coming in, what am I experiencing. And I've told my kids for a long time, if you ever feel emotionally charged about something, especially things that come through the media or the news. That's why wedge topics are so powerful. If there is some large emotional response that you are feeling inside of you based upon a piece of news or information that you're receiving, you have to ask yourself, where is that coming from and who is benefiting from the response? Everybody's going to have a certain kind of response to certain pieces of information, certain experiences, and things like that. And so, since I believe that it's obvious that our brains are programmable, if we, as sovereign individuals, do not take responsibility and consciously define what those meanings are, what the feelings we give those experiences are, then we are open to somebody else defining that for us. And it's extremely easy to do. It's extremely passive because it takes a lot of effort to consciously define these things. And then not only that, once you become aware that you can't do this, it takes a long time and a lot of effort to unlearn and uncondition oneself from previously programmed responses. This is why the statements back to our regular scheduled programming exists on the television, because there is so much that we're given passively that goes into our subconscious mind that programs us in very specific ways, and because of that, it makes those in a position of authority and power to use those pre-programmed pressure points, those pre-programmed definitions to their advantage. And so, without consciousness, there's subconscious response, there's impulse responses, because it's easy, it's reflexive, it's programmed in, it's ingrained. So one has to consciously choose, one has to consciously work to unlearn and decouple oneself from those pre-programmed meanings and definitions and responses. Now, I don't fault anybody for being programmed or being passive. Like I've said before, we're giant bags of water and we're electromagnetic beings. The path of least resistance. It's understandable. At the same time, it's still true that if we're not conscious about what we give meaning to, then we're open to basically, having malware installed, more or less, and being led to conclusions and actions and to support things that serve not the greater good, not us, not us as individuals, not us as a species. Now, let me go back even further because I wanted to find this. When 9/11 happened, I was in college and I was taking a shower, and I was living with Angela, or maybe she was living above me. We were together, and she comes in and she gets me and she's like, hey, she's like, you should take a look at this. She's like, a plane flew into the Twin Towers. They're saying it's a terrorist attack. And I just remember being like, what? Like, what the hell? So I get out of the shower, dry myself off, and I am able to catch the TV just in time for the second plane to hit the towers. And it was surreal. It felt like I was watching a movie. I was like, is this even real? And prior to that event, I was just like everybody else. When 9/11 happened, there was a very intuitive feeling inside of me that was like, something's not right. And as I watched things unfold, I had questions, like just real simple questions. Mayor Giuliani was like, we've got to get the debris out of New York and clean up this site like immediately. And I was like, hold on a second. Just by due process, like, where is the investigation? Like, don't we need to leave the crime scene undisturbed? Because I'll tell you right now, if you go and commit a crime anywhere, if you were to murder somebody and you go mucking about the crime scene, that's illegal. Like, there's evidence there. They need to figure that out and see what the hell happened. The crime scene needs to be undisturbed, yet there was this immediate call for just getting everything out. And there's a whole lot of other stuff that I won't get into, but 9/11 really struck me, and I wrote about it. I wrote about it 6 days later, and I've kind of forgot that I wrote this, and I've come across it a couple of times, and I have it saved, and I have it. I have a date and timestamp on this, which I'm so glad. This is why I date and timestamp my videos. So let me share this with you, because this is part of what can make me cry. So I wrote this on September 17th, 2021. September 17th, 2001 at 12:42 p.m. I said, well, I'm skipping class right now, obviously, but that does not matter. What matters is what's going on through my mind at this time. Man, thoughts on what's going on in this world right now and the things that could occur make my mind go nuts. Thoughts of leaving this land of the US and going somewhere like Brazil tempt my inner being with the thoughts of freedom and the relaxation that it could bring, as well as the turmoil and new change that would inevitably happen. But the thoughts of staying in a place like this of the US, images of us going to war with an unknown enemy that works within our very walls of protection, is a very unsettling idea by any standard. I cannot help but picture the US completely fucking things up, driving our economy to hell and never back again. Financially crippled, we will run into the troubles of funding our army and military to operate and continue this uncalled for military action against a suspect. Since we run out of money and fall on hard times, we may find some help from our allies, but nothing will be the same. The terrorists will still be out there. We will ever be more the weaker nation than we were prior to these attacks. I have this unyielding feeling that we are starting something that we cannot finish. I told my mom that I felt this whole ordeal was the beginning of the end, of something I do not yet know. I just told her that I hope it was not us, but as it appears, it very well may be. That was on September 17th, 2001. And I didn't share that with anybody. I did share it with, Angela and I went to marriage counseling, and I shared it with my marriage counselor, and I'm unsure exactly. I did it because, so that way she had context of like where I was at. Because part of the thing that was going on between me and Angela was that back when I was freaking out about the state of the world again, my energy was wildly different. It was antagonistic towards my relationships. It just was not healthy. It was not good. That counselor was like, you need to see a psychiatrist. I think you've got post-traumatic stress disorder and all this. And I'm like, man, I'm not being labeled by the system. You know what I mean? I just wanted to put that out there that I found that. And that was, coming up on 22 years. And so what I'm getting with all of this is that for some reason, it's very interesting to me that the things that were going on in August 2015 and then now August 2023 with this Venus cycle, whatever it means, it's curious. It's very curious to me. Now, to kind of bring this in a little bit more, to tie astrology into some of the other things that I've been, looking at. Let me see if I could find... I wasn't necessarily prepared for this one. Okay. I'm going to mispronounce this dude's name probably, and I looked it up the other day, and how do I... Okay, I think I can do it fairly decently. So there is like what the father of, or at least a prominent scientist in quantum string theory, right? His name is Michio Kaku, and I apologize if I mispronounce it. He gave a talk about a month ago at Google, right? So you can go find this Google Talks, and it's about quantum supremacy. And basically what quantum supremacy is where a quantum computer can solve some type of calculation, and it doesn't have to even be meaningful. It's just about it performing it better than a classical digital computer, right? And it doesn't have to have any practical application. It just has to show that the quantum computer can do it better. And then if you want to know how quantum computers work, I believe it's Scientific America has a pretty good video about how quantum computers work. And the whole idea is that, in digital computing, things are viewed in ones and zeros and kind of one at a time in an iterative type of process. You say they give an example of figuring out the correct path for a mouse to get to the cheese in a maze, right? Digital computing would be like, okay, here's a potential path, here's a potential path, here's a potential path, and it would analyze each of those separately, whereas quantum computing can analyze all possibilities one time, at once. And that's the radical difference. So you don't even program the quantum computing the same way. It just it doesn't work with binary. It doesn't work with ones and zeros. It works with waves and the way that photons interact. And there's different ways. What's really cool about this talk is that you learn that there's pretty much an infinite different ways, but there's not just one way to create quantum computing. You learn that IBM developed a certain way, Google developed a certain way, the Chinese have developed a certain way, and they're all different. And so, but yet they all operate on the quantum level. And so the reason I bring this in with astrology is that back in 2014, I wrote one of my friends and I was like, I believe that the ancients knew about, they created allegories and they created stories about how, the gods, the planets, things like this, influenced our life here on Earth. And I was like, today's scientists just call it entanglement, right? There's a thing called quantum entanglement where two particles at any distance interact with each other. They can behave. This is why, like things like love, I think, or just pretty much anything, like we are connected. We are all connected. So to me, like why astrology uses a form of pageantry in a way, in a form of definite interpretation, I believe at a fundamental level, there is a real kind of quantum mechanics going on that people use language of astrology to kind of explain the experience, right? But I think that there's probably a definite scientific, proof in a way that can explain these interactions, and these patterns. And so if you go look at the double slit experiment, like when you shoot one photon, you have two slits in a sheet, and then you shoot one photon through one slit, an interference pattern, you would think that you're going to get one line on the back plate, right? That's not what happens. You get this interference pattern. And so what this means is that it exists in all states at once, so the scientist was talking about, how you were told by your parents that you can't be in more places than you can't be in two places at once. We lied to you. You know what I mean? And it's a very interesting talk. It's probably about an hour long. I would definitely recommend that. And to kind of tie back into while there's these things, that I've been talking about, the Rand Corporation, Jericho, the finances, all of that stuff can be, at least it can be very disturbing to think about. It's very, it's very dark in a way. It's insidious. It's definitely, it's not happy-go-lucky stuff, right? And at the same time, the other day, earlier, I guess, in my previous video, I said there's two ways it can go. Really, there's always more than two options. I was being kind of short-sighted in that previous video. There's always a third option. And we could, as a species, choose something different. We could choose something different. We can become aware, and we can move towards something that does not involve great human suffering. There's always that potential. Definitely what I was talking about before, to me, reflects that subconscious, right? That subconscious programming that there's always negative. It's always negative, right? It doesn't have to be. So even while there's this darkness, there's these things that are true and they do exist. There are conspiracies that exist. There are people out there that try to control things and to influence things to their benefit, and consolidation of power is a real thing, all of that. That doesn't mean that we have to play victim, right? It doesn't mean that our species has to be shackled to that. We have options. And so I want to acknowledge that I was being closed off to that. I was being short-sighted in my previous video, and it does allow me to be hopeful that we can change. We can change. And so I I just want to kind of go back. There's something else I want to bring up, and I'm not sure how it's all entirely related. This kind of feels a little separate, although it probably relates somehow. And so I just want to talk about, my experience like with my family and my mom. And in that last text exchange that I had with my mom, I told her, I was like, there's a big wound that I have around being understood, right? Or being kind of accepted. And I've been thinking about this off and on. I haven't been speaking about it, but I've been thinking about it since that exchange. And, I like words. And so I was like, okay, let's look up the definition of accept, right? So when you define accept, there's the first definition, which is consent to receive a thing offered. And the second definition is to believe or come to recognize an opinion, an explanation, as valid or correct, okay? And then there's also like approval, right? There's definitely like, from me, I was looking for like acceptance, and I was like, what else am I looking for? Like approval, okay? So the definition of approval is the action of approving something, similar to acceptance, right? Agreement, consent. Another definition is the belief that someone or something is good or acceptable, right? So there's approval. I was looking for approval. And then I looked up resistance, right? Define resistance. Resistance is the refusal to accept or comply with something, the attempt to prevent something by action or argument. The second definition is the ability not to be affected by something, especially adversely. So like another, synonym is to oppose or be in opposition to. There's an aversion, refusal to accept. And so I just got to thinking about just about these words and how I have been seeking these things, right? The acceptance of, the approval of, like this external validation of who I am and what my choices have been and how I live my life. There's been this constant desire. That's where that wound came from, about being accepted, being approved. There's also a level of, permission, basically. And permission to just be, right? And when I was in a relationship with Reese, permission was definitely a huge thing. And she really helped me heal a lot around permission, around a lot of things. And so as I was thinking through this, it was just about letting that go, right? Letting that go for all of us, in the sense of like the fact that you are here, the fact that you are alive, the fact that you exist is enough. And I was just thinking about how me seeking that approval or that acceptance from my mom, and this goes back to like our subconscious programming and how it's passively programmed into us. This is something that we're taught, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong or good or bad. I'm just saying it's something that we're taught. And at the same time, even like with my own mom and her mom, I believe that there's certain things that, I'm sure my mom would have liked to have been accepted or approved in certain ways. And then my grandma to her mom, these kinds of things. We're human, and I don't know if it's possible for humans, being imperfect, for us to practice unconditional love, and so I just say that because having the desire to seek that approval, to seek that acceptance, hey, what's up, Mac, from the outside of me, I've found, as over the past handful of days, even though I haven't been talking about it, was closing me off, right? Was kind of shutting me down in some ways, and was a form of seeking external validation, which, if you go and talk to anybody in the mental health arena, they'll tell you that that's like it's a no-win. You're not going to win that game, right? There's no reason to get that, because everything comes from within. And so just kind of working with this idea and letting that go, letting that desire to have that acceptance or that approval from my mom or from my family, and just releasing that and working on letting that go, I could feel it really open myself up. It's not about like having a bad attitude towards my mom. It's not about dismissing my mom or my family. It's not about, it's not about having that kind of energy. It's just about like understanding how that desire, how that felt in my body about like, I would love to have acceptance. I would love to be approved, and just how that sinking feeling, how that wound, how that's an energy, and how that just felt inside of my body. And it felt restrictive. It felt collapsing. It felt very much closed, right? And that's where the whole resistance comes in. And whatever you resist persists, right? And so if you resist something, you're still giving it energy. And so just learning to let it go, I could feel in my body, I could feel myself open up. I could feel myself relax. I could feel myself being able to receive more, to be open to receive more, and to be more accepting of not just myself, but also of my mom and of my family, just to learn that like, there's no reason for me to have that wound or to feed that wound or to be attached to that desire, because that is actually hurting me. It's not helping me. It's closing me off rather than growing me. And so that's just something I've been working through over the last handful of days. Again, I haven't been speaking to it. Now, one of the things that came to my mind too about this is that, children are, great mirrors for us, right? And so reflecting things back. And then I think that's part of where the acceptance and approval comes from as well. Because as I've said before, I'm like, I grew up in Christian family, Lutheran family, right? Faith-based family. And so here I am participating in what I feel is a practice of faith. And so I'm reflecting back to my mom what I feel is a practice of faith. I'm reflecting back to my family what I feel is what faith means to me. And even though I'm reflecting that back, I'm not experiencing acceptance and I'm not experiencing approval. I'm experiencing resistance. And so it's this cycle of learning like, okay, look, it's kind of like looking in the mirror and not liking what you see, right? If you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I don't like how I look, or I don't like this thing about me, or whatever. That's a form of self-harm, right? If you have something about yourself that you don't like, that's a form of self-harm. And I'm sure we can all relate to how that feels. It doesn't feel good, does it? And so the mental jujitsu, the trick is to learn to love the flaw, to love the thing that we don't necessarily quote unquote like about ourselves, to learn to accept and approve and to give permission to exist, that it's okay, that everything is okay, right? Which is what I had to do with the kid, in 2021, He didn't necessarily like how he was being. He didn't like how it felt. And I was like, dude, it's all okay. And it is all okay. Giving him permission to be exactly as he was. And that transmuted the entire energy of everything. And so it's about that transmutation. And I think the reason I'm bringing that up is because everything that I was just talking about before, it's easy to fall into the doom and gloom. It's easy to look at these things and have fear be inspired and to feel that it's a valid feeling. And at the same time, the opposite can be true as well. These are not mutually exclusive things. We can transmute this and turn that into something positive and something that actually opens us up to opportunities. And yeah, Mac, I wouldn't even necessarily say agree to disagree, because I don't think there's no agreement or disagreement. To me, it's about allowing things to just be. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. It goes back to the creation triangle that I was talking about. How can I see myself in the other? It's about neutralizing that entire idea, like altogether, is that there is no agreement, there is no disagreement. It just is. And so, and seeing myself in that, like when you look in the mirror, it's just the reflection. It's just the reflection. It's just data. It's completely neutral. There's no agreement. There's no disagreement. It's just a reflection. And so being able to see myself and my mom, because I know I have things that I resist. I know that I have things that I don't accept. I have things that I don't approve of. And so it's a principlistic thing. So even though it may be on different topics or different areas of life, I still have it within myself to not accept something. I still have it within myself to not approve of something. And so understanding that regardless of how it's expressed or where it shows up, it's a principlistic thing. And once I understand that, then it just allows me to open up and just neutralize the whole thing. Like, okay, so it's okay that my mom doesn't accept these things or doesn't approve these things, because I myself don't approve of this or accept this over here with somebody else or something else in life. It's the principle of acceptance or approval. It doesn't even have to be related to the exact same thing. So to me, it's about understanding. It's a unifying thing. It's a unifying thing. And to me, that's what my practice is always about, is about finding myself in the other. And it doesn't have to be in the exact same way. It just has to be on that principle level. Yeah, I do that too. I just do it over here and I do it in this way. Oh, I do that too. I just do it over here and I do it this way. And it allows me to have that compassion. It allows me to then accept the other person's expression. It allows me to then have, permission. And it's like, oh, it's okay. Like, even though, like, say with the kid that I helped in March there, I didn't express myself the same way. I didn't have the same experiences, but I absolutely recognized the energy. I recognized where he was at, where it was coming from. And that's how the relationship, that because it was universal, it was a principle thing. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I've been kind of talking for a while now, I feel. And that's pretty much what I got. I appreciate you jumping on and having a conversation with me, Matt, because I do work better in a conversation kind of a way, so I appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. And let's see. Yeah, true. Yeah, no, that's true. There could be the perpetuation of the how do we want to say, of the conflict. That's true. I think then that comes back to this is where the boundaries come in, and this is kind of like what other people say, like you can still love people, at a distance and that kind of a thing. It's not about transforming other people, right? It's not necessarily about forcing change on somebody else. It's always about how we are able to change ourselves and how we relate to the experience. The other person involved very well may continue along their beliefs and have a certain behavior or action, and we have to have boundaries around that kind of a thing. And on the flip side, through the Real Zach Olinger podcast that I did, where you were the first guest, Mac, there were a couple of people. Melissa is one of them for sure, that she always comes to my mind. When she started doing the work on herself, now it took a few months, but when she started to do the work on herself and changing herself, then her husband, because she had done internal changes, her husband started to change as well. And so that's something else that people, right, in the mental health space or in coaching talk about, like, as you start to change yourself, your life begins to change. What you experience begins to change. What other people in your life, they begin to change. And so it always starts with us. It always starts with the individual. It always starts with how we show up. What are we bringing back? How are we relating back? How are we relating to the experience, right? That's what I wrote on my LinkedIn article, about the word relate, and what am I bringing back from my past to build my now. And as we refine the resources that we're using to build the now, that influences what other people are experiencing of us, and it's a vibrational thing, and it ripples out. Yeah, absolutely. We sometimes feel it with ourselves, 100%. And it goes both ways, right? So sometimes we fuel it in the sense that we are contributing to the fire, and sometimes we fuel it by neutralizing it based on those resources, based on how we're choosing to relate to the experience. What are we bringing back? So it goes both ways that way. But it does start with ourselves, I think, is the thing that we're talking about. So, all right. Again, I've been talking for a long time. I do really appreciate the discourse and the back and forth here. Thanks for contributing. I do love that. I work really well with that. So thanks, Mac. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up because I feel like I've been talking for like 40 minutes. All right. I love you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye.